One, whether the issue be nuclear war or your personal health, modern-day argumentation in the United States of America amounts to F you. Two, the best helmets in college football ranking 10 through 20. Three, revisiting the power of a small minority and building consensus. A little bit of self-reflection on the need to belong and my abrasive personality. It's the Will Cain Podcast on Fox News Podcast. What's up, and welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to the middle of the week. As always, I hope that means you will then have time to download, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your audio entertainment, at Apple, Spotify, or at Fox News Podcast. You can always watch the Will Cain Podcast on Rumble or YouTube. It's a big week in my life. It's a big week in college football. It's a big week in flyover country. It is the Red River rivalry. It is Texas OU. For the first time in decades, it is a Red River rivalry where neither Texas nor Oklahoma are ranked. But that will take none of the salt out of the game. I will be watching the game this weekend in New York City with my buddies Pete Hegseth and Rick Reichmuth from Fox and Friends. Maybe you can join us on the Friday episode of the Will Cain Podcast. I'll tell you where we plan to post up and have a good time Saturday, while hopefully watching my Longhorns take down the Sooners. You want to hang in for this episode of the Will Cain Podcast because I want to take you through exactly how perilous this moment is in history. Whether or not we are, or should be, debating nuclear annihilation or whether or not to inject an experimental medication into your arm, we are only met with one real persuasive technique, one real argument. We are met with F you. And at the end of this podcast, I will, in all sincerity, indulge in a bit of self-reflection. Last week, we talked about the power of a small minority, how nothing in American culture is truly driven by consensus, but an intransigent 3% can coalesce an easygoing, easy-seeking path of least resistance, 51%. Do not think that I exempt myself. I, too, sometimes just want to belong. I, too, sometimes just want commonality. It's just not my instinct. My instinct is an abrasive personality. First, story number 1. F you. That's how you convince the American public to do as you say. That clearly is the persuasion technique of the vast majority of people, not just in the United States of America, but in the world. It's truly stunning how nothing more than F you, nothing more than an ad hominem attack, attacking not an argument, but a person's character, is seen as an appropriate response, whether or not we're talking about the vaccine for COVID-19 or nuclear war with Russia. And it is not limited to Twitter trolls. Let me offer you up the story this week of billionaire Elon Musk. Elon Musk took to Twitter. News breaks this week that Elon Musk will seek to resubmit his original bid to purchase Twitter. As such, he's engaged on his favorite platform and offered up what appears to be a sincere peace deal to find an off-ramp between the war between Ukraine and Russia, to find some avoidance of nuclear holocaust. Elon Musk tweeted the following. He said, Ukraine, Russia, peace, 4 bullet points. First, redo elections of annexed regions under UN supervision. Russia leaves if that is the will of the people. Elon Musk is there referring to the 3, or is it 4, Donbass in eastern Ukraine that Russia has attempted to annex. It's an acknowledgement that an election under the guidance of Russia is suspicious. Musk suggests placing a new election under the guidance of the United Nations. And if the Ukrainian people of the East vote to eject Russia, Russia must go. If those people, many of whom are from Russian ethnicity and heritage, choose to join Russia, then those regions become Russia. Bullet point number 2. Crimea, formerly part of Russia, as it has been since 1783, until Khrushchev's mistake. Crimea was part of the first Russian-Ukrainian conflict some decade ago. It reverted to Russian possession. Here, Musk is proposing that the question of Crimea, be settled in favor of Russia, leading him to bullet point number 3. Water supply to Crimea is assured. Crimea has no local water source. It relies on canals and rivers coming out of central Ukraine into the peninsula that is Crimea. Musk is suggesting that they settle that with free access to ready water. That has not always been the case, as Ukraine has dried out, dehydrated, turned off the water source to Crimea anytime there has been a conflict. Musk is suggesting let the water flow to Crimea. Number 4, bullet point number 4, Ukraine remains neutral. That means Ukraine does not seek to join NATO. That Ukraine remains neutral in the fight, the Cold War, between the East and the West, between Russia and NATO. Musk went on to tweet, this is a highly unlikely outcome in the end, just a question of how many die before then. And in what amounts to modern diplomacy, apparently, Ukraine's ambassador to Germany tweeted in response to Elon Musk. He said the following: the only outcome is that now no Ukrainian will ever buy your effing Tesla crap. So good luck to you. Andrzej Melnyk, again the ambassador of Ukraine to Germany, then decided one tweet was not enough. He responded secondarily with, F off is my very diplomatic reply to you, Elon Musk. Formal diplomacy taking the form of FU. Now, the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany isn't the only official of high repute reverting to this singular response to serious questions. You're not allowed to ask serious questions. No more. Not since the last several years. If you ask serious questions, if you indulge in critical thinking, you are a vaccine denier. You are an anti-vaxxer. You are a Putin apologist. You are a segregationist, a white supremacist. You are a tool of Putin. The examples abound. Garry Kasparov, famous chess player, also responded extremely negatively to Elon Musk. He didn't really have much of an argument to make, just once again insulting Musk. And it's not limited, by the way, to Elon Musk. Jeffrey Sachs, Columbia professor, esteemed voice of the left, went on to Bloomberg television this week where he offered up that it was the United States of America who sabotaged the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipeline. He said this seemingly not even believing the words coming out of his mouth would be controversial, but he was immediately, not even halfway into his spiel, interrupted by the anchor at Bloomberg. Hold it right there. Hold it, Jeffrey. Hold it right there. Now, what possible evidence do you have to implicate the United States of America? Therein, the professor began to lay out his case, similar to how you and I laid out the case together in Monday's episode of the Cain Podcast. Talked about incentive, talked about Tony Blinken's statements that now we have a strategic advantage in providing oil and gas to Europe. Talked about Biden's threats, talked about reports of both aerial and naval activity in the area from the United States of America of this sabotage during the time period in which the pipelines exploded. But in laying out his case on Bloomberg, he was interrupted or attempted to be interrupted on numerous occasions by the two anchors. It was as though we cannot possibly allow these words to be heard. And that in the end is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with argumentation or persuasion. No, we are well deep into the world of censorship and propaganda, and we have been for years. It really is stunning that we have allowed not just our governance and not just our culture, but our individual mindsets to warp into this position that if anyone disagrees, and disagrees on topics of such import, all you have to do is attack them as a person. You do not have to offer any sincere rebuttal. Of course, Tucker Carlson has been one of the leading voices laying out the case, as did Jeffrey Sachs on Bloomberg. Every night on the Fox News channel, Tucker Carlson has laid out the case that he believes it is the United States of America that sabotaged the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipeline. What I find so fascinating is every morning you wake up and you go onto social media and you don't find a coherent rebuttal. What you find is just more ad hominem attacks. But again, these ad hominem attacks do not come from simply Twitter trolls. Oh, you get that for sure. If Twitter trolls are any reflection of our individual mindsets or our culture, then we should be terrified, because the comments under posts with videos of Tucker laying out who might have sabotaged Nord Stream 1 or 2 amounts to stuff like, quote, FBI, what can we do about this? Or he should be registered as a foreign agent. These aren't simply people calling Tucker a Putin apologist. These aren't simply people calling names. These aren't even simply people asking for censorship. These are people asking for jackbooted thugs with government-issued weapons to go in and arrest Tucker Carlson. That is a mindset that exists and may have always existed, and social media only showed us, but certainly exists today in the United States of America. But it also comes not just from Twitter trolls, but the notorious blue checkmark brigade of Twitter. I laid out on Monday that I cannot believe we arrived at a place where the modern day American left is pro-war, is pro-cavalier approach to nuclear holocaust. But they're not. They're simply playing opposite day. Whatever they believe might be the position of Donald Trump, and to a lesser extent of Tucker Carlson, it is their job. And honestly, quite literally their job, because we're talking about organizations like Media Matters or the Daily Beast who have paid hacks to watch Fox News, to distort his words, and then just launch ad hominem attacks. Just insult. But I'm also surprised by the fact that, honestly, a lot of people that I've respected, that I like in the past, a lot of people on the right whose words I have really honestly sought out for wisdom to employ the same techniques. I'm not going to say this individual's name because I don't feel like indulging in the personal attack and doesn't wield enough influence for it to matter. But this individual said, look, Tucker is not a Russian asset. Tucker is just an a-hole. End of tweet. This very intelligent person felt no need to lay out an argument, no need to make his case. Simply insult. Simply employ the Ukrainian diplomatic technique of F you. That's all we're left with. And for what it's worth, we're left with that persuasion technique as we invest this week another $625 million in Ukraine. Do we all know? Because it took me a minute to go on Google, and it wasn't easily Googleable, to be honest. What is the total amount of aid the United States has sent to Ukraine? Military and humanitarian aid. In the year, say, 2022. So let's just go with 9 months of investment, which really only began in February. So 8 months of investment in Ukraine. What has the United States contributed? And we are somewhere in the vicinity of $80 billion. $80 billion in 8 months. Now, whenever you start talking about billions, because you get into abstract concepts, and for me, and I think many of you, billions an abstract concept. What is that? Well, I'll tell you this. The Russian military budget for 1 year is $66 billion. We have given more to Ukraine than Russia spends in a year on its military. Let's go with further context. We haven't given this amount of money to one individual nation in half a century. I believe it's since Vietnam. That's not to count our military contributions, our military direct investment in our military in Afghanistan, but direct contribution to a foreign power. Not since the days of Vietnam have we given this kind of money away. Let's go. Maybe that doesn't quite do the trick. How about this? 80 billion is roughly 10% of the budget for what we spend on military. I believe our Pentagon spending is something like $750 billion total. So 10% total now is going to Ukraine. You know, when it's said, and it gets said by Tucker Carlson, for example, that Ukraine is a United States of America client state, this kind of money certainly supports the case. And we far outpace any other government's contribution to Ukraine. I mean, UK, any individual European nation, not a fraction of what the United States of America is contributing to quote-unquote humanitarian and military aid for Ukraine. And where is all that money going? I mean, this money, you have to know, is untrackable. Where is it going? What is it buying? I know we're making direct contributions in kind of military equipment, but where is that going? What is happening? What is being laundered? Who is receiving? Where does it go from there? What terrorist organizations? What criminal enterprises? What bounce back effect of all of this money, of all of this military equipment, of all these guns, of all of this ammunition can be laundered through $80 billion in 8 months? The mind boggles because we have no idea. Literally no one has any idea. Least of all, Vladimir Zelensky. Zelensky, to bring this full circle, also responded to Elon Musk. He said, which Elon Musk, of course, on Twitter, do you like better? The Elon Musk that supported Ukraine or the Elon Musk that supports Russia? Here you have Vladimir Zelensky resorting to the most persuasive rhetorical technique of the day. F you. Accusing Musk of supporting Russia, of being a tool of Vladimir Putin. Now, this is Elon Musk, who in the opening days of the war personally contributed. There are a few contracts on the books, but not to cover what he has contributed. So has taken a lost leader in contributing Starlink internet service to Ukraine when the power and internet were cut out by Russia. That was what Elon Musk did. But in the world of Vladimir Zelensky, it is, what have you done for me lately? There's no loyalty. There's certainly no gratitude. There's no appreciation. In fact, the minute you waver, the minute you ask a critical question, the minute you critically think, the world replies, F you. The minute you look for a peace deal, and there was a peace deal sought, Turkey tried to broker it between Russia and Ukraine some months ago. Well, the United States, the UK, the world's elite, the military-industrial complex, and the voices on Twitter respond, F you. Joe Biden has made very clear the goal. I mean, he has. And again, F me for listening to his words, for critically listening. But he has said, quote, dear God, this man cannot remain in power. That is a goal, a stated goal, that has nothing to do with Ukrainian territorial sovereignty, has nothing to do with avoiding nuclear conflict. It is a stated goal of regime change. So if you reject potential peace deals and you respond to F you to anyone who dares offer up a potential peace deal, you, yes, push towards only one singular outcome, regime change, but push us also closer to nuclear conflict. It is though every diplomatic leader, every politician, certainly every Twitter troll, seems to think they are the modern-day incarnation of William Wallace, or at least Mel Gibson's characterization of William Wallace in Braveheart. Do you remember the negotiation? The English nobles ride out to meet the Scottish nobles on the battlefield to negotiate a peace. And it's supposedly how it always goes. You mount up your armies, you look tough, you beat your chests, and then the nobles, the elites, ride out to negotiate a peace. But in the midst of this very predictable pattern, out rides a blue face-painted warrior in William Wallace. And he interrupts the negotiations. He goes to the English nobles and says something to the effect of, your terms are rejected. And the English nobles say, well, what are your terms, sir? And he says, turn around, ride off this battlefield. On your way out, kiss the ass of every single soldier mounted on the other sidelines. And then on your way back to England, stop and apologize to every mother and every child, every grandmother, for thousands of years of rape, torture, and subjugation. Only then will you find peace in Scotland. Every Twitter troll thinks that's who he is. And I'm dead serious about that. You can find tweets. And again, now these are not just crazy people on the internet. These are crazy people with big-time media jobs who say the only acceptable outcome is Vladimir Putin retreating out of Ukrainian sovereignty, territorial sovereignty, but not just that. Apologize, give up, denuclearization, regime change, give up power. All of it. It is the William Wallace statement. The entire world, or those with influence and those who would call you a Putin apologist, accept only the terms of William Wallace. And if they're unwilling to get it, then your money, my money, will continue to be spent. The kind of money that outpaces, for example, what we spend, it's half of what we spend. $80 billion on education annually in this country. Or even worse, if money is no object, the potential for nuclear conflict. It cannot be that everyone who is willing to consider a risk-reward analysis is simply a Putin apologist. It cannot be that everyone who declines to look at this in the most simplistic of terms, F you, is a tool of Putin. We've lost complete control of the ability to persuade. And to be quite clear, although I think that is a largely bipartisan cultural shift, it is no doubt unanimously accepted on the American left. And it is echoed from the smallest of influences to the heights of power. Joe Biden has taken up the mantle of his politician predecessors in maligning his political opponents. Not Donald Trump, not his direct opponents, but those who deign to vote differently, those who dare to disagree. He has taken up the mantle of calling those people, individual Americans, the dregs, chumps, irredeemable, clingers, deplorables, stupid, racist, MAGA GOP, semi-fascists, threats to democracies, and literal Nazis. That's the progression from Barack Obama to Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden. The modern American left and the Democratic Party have given up on the power of persuasion. They cast their opponents as Morlocks, in the words of Victor Davis Hanson. Morlocks from the darkness who cannot find their way to the light. That is the imagery. That's the rhetoric employed, again by Joe Biden, not in reference to his political opponent, but to those who would vote for his political opponent. Those that cannot see the light, who live in the shadow of, and now I'm quoting, the shadow of lies. In the entire enterprise, not a single shred of evidence is ever offered. No argument, no real argument. No, simply ad hominem attacks. Persuasion is over. This is hate speech. And your curiosity, not your vote even, because that's where we've moved. It's not simply those that disagree. It's not simply those who vote in their disfavor. But now those who question the efficacy of a vaccine, the risk-reward analysis for a child on the vaccine, those who critically think, those who critically question, those who want to run the risk-reward on particular billions of dollars shipped to a foreign power versus how it could be spent at home. Those who would want to weigh the pros and cons of a standoff with a nuclear power. Those who would critically observe the cost in literal potential human lives of this conflict are only met with one argument and one argument only. Whether or not it's a diplomat, a president. Whether or not it's a journalist or a Twitter troll. You are only met with FU. Story number 2. It's Will's weekly quarterback depth chart and the best helmets in college football, 10 to 20. Quickly, here are my top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL this week. At number 5, Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Let's make this the bulk of our conversation in Will's weekly quarterback depth chart. Man, I got to tell you, I thought it was ugly and I thought it was wrong. When Tua was essentially knocked out the week prior and had trouble getting back to the huddle, stumbling around, every one of us knows the signs of a concussion. Just like we can all look at a grandparent and see when they're getting senile and then apply that to Joe Biden, we can all see what it is when somebody's doozy, and that's a brain injury. not a back injury, as it was diagnosed. When that happened, look, man, I, for one, don't want to see him back on the field in 3 to 4 days. And then on Thursday night, he was hit hard again to the turf, although not as an isolated singular hit, one that you would think would send him into a seizure. And yet there is Tua on the ground, fingers convulsed, arms held in the scariest frozen of images. Since that time, the quote-unquote independent doctor who reviewed Tua 4 days prior has been fired for, quote, mistakes in his diagnosis. There are many that argue back to me, look, you're a gladiator who chooses and knows the risks. And that may be. I certainly am not someone who wants to turn football into flag football. In fact, what I would do is I'd make football more safe by making it less safe. What I would do is I would take off helmets. I would make football more like rugby or old school football, small leather helmets, something where you're not incentivized to use your head as a weapon, where you're incentivized to bang heads into each other. I think that if we were to do that, you would have people pulling up, tackling with their shoulders, better form tackling, less head injuries, maybe more shoulder dislocations, maybe more broken noses, but a lot fewer concussions. So I'm not here asking for a softer football. I'm asking for a football that makes sense. And if you have a concussion protocol, well, then that's a concussion protocol that has to make sense. It can't be one where a guy clearly into his situation ends up back on the field in 3 to 4 days. I know he's a warrior, and I know he's there by voluntary selection. But if you voluntarily sign up for something that has a protocol, you've got to trust that that protocol works. Clearly what happened with Tua did not work. At number 4, Justin Herbert. At number 3, Jalen Hurts. I have to finally give him credit. The only undefeated team in the NFL. A bit of a caveat, one of the weakest schedules in the NFL. I remain unconvinced overall about the Eagles and somewhat unconvinced of Jalen Hurts. But it's a picture in time, and at this moment in time, Jalen Hurts deserves his credit. At number 2, Patrick Mahomes. And at number 1, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. With that, here are your next best 10 helmets in college football. When I gave you my top 10 helmets in college football, I, of course, got a lot of feedback. People hated my list, said it was too traditional, too boring, too big-time programmed, not creative. Penn State, Alabama, are you kidding me, Will? But one of the pieces of feedback that I got that I enjoyed the most was you really should do 10 through 20 because that's when the real debate begins. And now you have my attention. It's true, as I'm going to talk about in story number 3 today. You've got to find the chewy nature of a conversation. That's where it's interesting. And for college football helmets, I think for me it starts at number 10. While my instinct is classic, traditional, simple, and old, I do appreciate, to some extent, let her rip. Rip the top off and make it as crazy as possible. It's a little bit, I like living in a city or rural. I'm not big on the middle ground. I don't love the suburbs. Nothing against the suburbs. Not for me. I don't like helmets that are somewhere between chromed out, blinged out, logo running all over the helmet, and Penn State. I like it on either end of the spectrum, and that's just me. So what you will see in these next 10 helmets is a bit more diverse. It's also going to be a bit more than 10 programs because a few fell into categories. Let's start with number 20. At number 20, 2 programs designed to show you my objectivity. Texas A&M and Oklahoma, the arch rivals of the University of Texas. Both of these helmets fall into traditional and simple, but they also satisfy something that I can objectively say is of quality. I may not love these helmets because I don't love these programs, but when you see OU and A&M on TV, you immediately know who they are. You do not have to guess who's playing. You don't have to look at the lower third. You don't have to look at the score box. You know who's playing. Those are iconic. They're both an iconic arrangement of letters. I happen to like the colors of Texas A&M. I've told you that in the past. I love maroon and white. And these two come in under the banner of classic and distinct at number 20. At number 19, University of Georgia. The Red Pops. It's again classic. It's the red version of the Green Bay Packers with that G. But among the classics, Georgia stands out. At number 18 is a category, and we're going to call this the cartoon category. And I like it. I've told you before, I like it if you let her rip. Here, I'm going to tell you that the cartoon category is best represented by North Carolina State. When North Carolina State has the big cartoonish wolf with the little looking Navy hat between his ears, but the logo was blown up huge, not in the traditional, just centered on the sides of the helmet, but it literally goes from the bottom of the ear hole up to the top of the stripe. I like it. I don't know. There's something, well, not just cartoonish, but classically cartoonish, like Looney Tunes cartoonish about it. And they're not the only program who've kind of done this, I think, in a successful way. I think, interestingly, it's all the land-grant programs, the state colleges from North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Oregon. Must be something consistent there. Oklahoma State, when they put Pistol Pete on the side of the helmet, either his face or his whole body, but also when they blow it out big, I like it. Much better than the simple OSU. Same thing with North Carolina State, than the S with the N and the C. Everyone in college football is doing some letter thing. I love it when you blow out the cartoon logo. You want another one? Oregon State with the beaver. Trick them out. You're not doing USFL boring 1990s graphic designer got in there and said, what's the sleekest looking thing we can make? No, this is in-your-face cartoonish. At number 18, the category best represented by the land-grant colleges, Oregon State, Oklahoma State, and North Carolina State. At number 17, it really is a quality helmet that takes up the entire headpiece, Maryland. And I'm talking not about the boring one that reads its terps on the side. I'm talking about the one that takes the Maryland state flag, which is a really cool state flag, by the way, with all the different clashing yellow and black and red going on, checkerboard and stripe. Awesome looking, fleur-de-lis, everything going on in that flag, everything going on in that helmet. Maryland's in the category of let her rip, boys. And with the added benefit of let her rip, boys, but also classic traditional touch with the state flag. Texas Tech did that once as well, which I really liked, which they commandeered the Lone Star flag of Texas. They went away from red and black for one, and then had a white field and a blue field on one side, was it? In a red field on the, I can't remember. I know what the state flag looks like. I can't remember what they did with the helmet. But it was tricolored and big and bold and block like our state flag. Give Maryland credit. Let her rip and traditional. At number 16, back to iconic, Michigan State. And again, set aside the lettering, bring in the small, distinct, crisp, white Spartan on the green helmet. The face of that Spartan, it's iconic. We all know it. You can think 300s. You can think Greek tragedy. You also think Michigan State when you see that on the side of the helmet. At number 15, a departure from sort of a rule, but every rule is meant to be broken and every rule needs a caveat. I told you I didn't like writing. I make an exception for Ole Miss. In part because it says Ole Miss. It doesn't say Mississippi or Miss or University of Mississippi or UM. It says Ole Miss, which is awesome. Come on, OLE, Miss. It's awesome. And whether or not you put it on a Navy field, or even better, my favorite, on the light blue field, or whatever they're doing right now with Lane Kiffin in this like Coors Light, blue and white, crushed color field. That light blue, more so than navy blue, combination with red, like, the Houston Oilers, looks awesome. That's an awesome color combo, and Ole Miss is iconic. At number 14, Clemson Tigers. Bright orange, okay, but the single white paw print, distinct, cool. And you know what's interesting about that? Not a dime a dozen. Like, I bet you see that paw print a lot in high school football. But off the top of my head, I can't think of a lot of other college football programs. And am I forgetting an NFL team that simply goes with the paw print? Not the Bears, not the Bengals, not the Jags, not the Panthers. It's good. A simple paw print. Awesome for Clemson. At number 13, the Wyoming Cowboys. I like this helmet and I like this color scheme so much that I once bought a Wyoming hat And I didn't even go to Wyoming, which is a little bit of a faux pas, or a lot of a faux pas. The only problem with that hat, it was a brown hat with a yellow, can you picture the Wyoming logo? White helmet, and then there's a cowboy riding a bucking bronco, but he's almost coming at you, like, directly. So I think I'm getting it right. He's not, just slightly angled. It looks a little bit like the Polo logo, like Ralph Lauren Polo logo. And I can't be wearing, and it's a gigantic emblem on the hat. It wasn't small. I was like, it kind of looked like, and I had enough people say, what is that, Polo? No, it's Wyoming Cowboys. So that was my only complaint. Like, I'm out here rocking Polo everywhere I run. I mean, what am I going to do next? Get like a gigantic Gucci hat and wear that too? Just with the logo? Or next thing you know, I got a brown hat with a bunch of yellow Louis Vuitton logo. Come on. It was dangerous. It was dangerous ground I was treading onto, which is weird because the Wyoming helmet is about as cowboy as you get. I mean, the colors, brown and yellow with that logo. Love the Wyoming helmet. At number 12, Southern Methodist University, SMU. Iconic. The Mustang, what an awesome, it's in motion, and yet it's still. No fake lines coming off the back of it. He's not, the horse doesn't have to be tilted, extremely to show he's super fast. Just that look, of like the front and the back legs coming together. Red, by the way. Red on white field. Blue stripe on top. SMU, iconic, awesome-looking helmet. Number 11, another iconic helmet. And possibly the best color scheme, just objectively in sports. Black and yellow, right? Name a black and yellow team that doesn't look good. Pittsburgh Penguins, Pittsburgh Steelers. How about Iowa Hawkeyes? Simple Hawkeye. A little bit like Michigan State, clean, not too big, not too small. Yellow on a black field. Awesome. Iconic, never change. And that is my tendency, to lean towards schools and helmets, never change. That's what my top 10 represented. So coming in at number 11, Iowa. And at number 10, did I do one extra? I didn't go 9 last time. How am I at number 10? Did I skip a number? I'm not going to go back and check this out. You have to. I know I didn't mess up last week. Did I mess up this week? It doesn't matter what number you give it. This category slips right in between my top 10 and Iowa. And this is the absolute letter rip category. This is 0 blanks given. This is our traditional helmet looks so bad and boring that we're going all in on chrome, on multiple color schemes, on, if not chrome, camouflage. We're going to hurt your eyes at times and please your eyes at others. I respect these programs, 3 in particular, that have gone all in. Of course, Oregon. Oregon has, I don't even know if they have a traditional helmet anymore. Is it the green helmet with the yellow O? But every other week it's chromed out green, chromed out yellow, duck wing filling up the whole helmet, old school retro, duck. It's good. It's good no matter how they cut it at this point because they're all creative. Only in my mind, outdone by 2 other programs. And maybe you're going to accuse me of regionalism, but I love what Baylor's done. Baylor has, historically, in my estimation, one of the most boring helmets. It's the simple BU interlocked. Somebody realized that, and they're like, let's go full-on gold. Like, just bling it out. Gold face mask, gold helmet. Then they're like, let's go matte black camo. And then they go, well, let's go to the same thing as Oregon did, the old school, simple little, bear with the funny hat on a Kelly green field. Oh, then I got another idea. Let's go canary yellow with a green and black bear. They're doing the cartoon thing from time to time that North Carolina State and those guys do. They're doing the Oregon thing from time to time. It's awesome. Only, again, outdone in my mind by one program, Texas Christian University. TCU, in part because what lends itself more to letting her rip than a horned frog? The helmet with the blood, red. It's primary colors, purple and black, a little bit of white, and then throw red in randomly because, of course, horned frog blood, spitting blood, that's what a horned frog does. So a little red here and there. Every different pattern scheme, color scheme, chrome, matte, whatever. TCU has done it and does it. and I love it. If you don't have history and tradition, I don't know, man. Build a McMansion as high as the eye can see. That's what TCU, Baylor, and Oregon have done. There's your 11 through 20, 11 through 21, 10 through 20. I messed up my numbers, but I didn't mess up my list. I'll post it on social media, on Instagram, see Will Cain, on Twitter, at Will Cain as well. You can always send me your feedback. I will, as always, read it. Story number 3. The power of a small minority and a little bit of self-reflection. I went and I had coffee with a buddy this week. He's a good friend. He's a smart guy. He also happens to be a listener of the Will Cain Podcast. And we were talking a bit about how it is that a small minority can lead 51% to a conclusion that not only had they not wedded themselves, but is often the case, a conclusion of which they'd argued in the opposite in the past. How is it an intransigent 3% can take charge of 50% and lead a jury pool, lead a courtroom, lead pop musical taste, lead political decisions, lead American culture? And in that, in thinking and in talking about how that's psychologically possible, I was forced to reconcile a little bit with, well, one of my personality traits, maybe my defining personality, observation. I hope you will indulge this bit of navel gazing or look in the mirror. One of the consistent pieces of feedback that I have gotten over my life, but also in my career, is that I'm a slow burn. This is best illustrated by my co-host on Fox and Friends Weekend, Rachel Campos Duffy. A few weeks ago, I did her podcast, and she said, you know, Will, I wasn't so sure about you in the beginning. And I was like, yeah. Well, I'm used to hearing that. Yeah, Rachel thought, I don't know. And I think Rachel still doesn't know fully. That's how much of a slow burn I am. Is Will an elitist? Is Will a country club guy? Is Will a squish? Is Will a moderate? What is Will? But I have noticed that over time, if someone will give me the time, what they will find are my opinions are authentic, and they are also, whether or not of quality, at least the product of an effort of thought, a depth of consideration. I'm sure that doesn't insulate me from being wrong. I'm sure that doesn't help me in being likable, but it's definitely coming from a place where I'm doing my best at all times to be interested and interesting, authentic, and value-added. And that's not just with you and me here, but that's in my personal life. For example, one of the worst scenarios for me is a casual dinner, in-laws, friends, whatever it may be, where everyone is sitting around talking about, oh, that flavor is interesting. I really like the way this tastes. How did you like your chicken? I don't want to be too hyperbolic on this. I'm somewhere short of suicidal, but definitely in the stage of depression. That chit-chat has taken the day. It could be a business gathering. It could be a social gathering. I can't do it, man. And I don't a lot of times. I will suddenly jump in and say, hey, what do you think the 10 best helmets are in college football? Just something. And it's not that I want to be contrarian, and it's not that I want to be disagreeable, but I need something stimulative, something interesting. My friend put this well. He goes, like, you and I, he's of a similar mindset, would sit there and go and look for, you like fried chicken? I don't like fried chicken. And everyone at the table would recoil, what is this? Might be time to go. And all of a sudden, like in Jerry Maguire, when Cuba Gooding Jr. said, just when you think it's going sideways, I think we're getting somewhere. I think it's getting interesting. And it's not because, again, I want to be confrontational, because there's something to learn about you. I'm getting to know you deeper. What is it about fried chicken that you love that I do not? By the way, I love fried chicken. Whatever it may be. This is where I'm headed in finding the real you. I don't want the superficial, easy to earn affirmation and commonalities. I think, but remember, this is an exercise in self-awareness. See, what I realized in talking to my friend, and I think this is absolutely true, how is it that so many people can go along in radical directions in culture? How is it 3% can be at the mercy, or 48% can be at the mercy of 3%? How is that? It's because most people go through the world looking for the path of least resistance. Most people go through the world surrounding themselves with comfort. That's one of the reasons, and you probably know I ascribe to this, and there's a movement of do hard things in life, right? Run a marathon, work out hard, whatever it may be, because we've created lives of nothing but comfort and simultaneously surrounded ourselves with depression and anxiety. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that a conundrum? The more comfort we seek, the more anxious we become. The more air conditioning we sit in, the more depressed our lives. The ease of tasty food, the worse we feel about ourselves. Hard things make us feel good about ourselves. In the end, but not immediately, we want not just affirmation, not just the path of least resistance. We want a sense of belonging. We want connection. I am not saying all this as though I am holier than thou. More on that in just a moment. And I'm not saying this as an indictment. I'm only saying it as an observation, both as individuals, you and me, and as a group in social settings, and as a culture of how an intransigent 3% can dictate our path in life. Because we want not simply the path of least resistance and ease. We want to belong. No scientist wants to go out on a limb and lose his reputation and be the black sheep within the industry saying, I'm not so sure about these vaccines. Or, I'm not sure about the efficacy of masks. Come on. You don't really think all those scientists believed we should all be wearing masks, that all these kids should get vaccinated? They don't. They're bending to the 3% so that they can belong. No one wants to be ostracized from the tribe. No one wants to be voted off the island. It's a simple fact of human nature. It's a survival skill. You don't survive out on your own. You survive within the tribe. We do it all the time, everywhere. And we also find the path of least resistance. It's not worth my fight. I don't want to, whatever. That 3% seems really dedicated. Fine. Let's move on to the next thing. So when we sit around and we talk about how did your chicken taste, we're looking for commonality. We're looking for belonging. We're looking for something that connects. Unfortunately for me, that's where I'm the most bored. Because I want to, my instinct is to find where our connection is at a deeper level. But now back to the self-awareness part. I'm not exempt from this. I was thinking about myself through this navel-gazing segment that it may be. And I've moved to Dallas in the past year and a half. And look, I've never lived in Dallas because I'm from a small town, 30,000 people, Sherman, Texas. Maybe 40,000 now. Projections are it's going to double in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not a suburb of Dallas. I want to be clear. And that's actually what I'm getting at. I always say that. I'm from a rural standalone town with pride in that town, Sherman, Texas. But now I live in Dallas, right? And Dallas is a different culture than growing up in a place like Sherman. It is. Look, it's more elite and fancy, and everybody dresses a little differently, a little less cowboy boots, a little more loafer. You know what I mean? A little fewer T-shirts, a lot more golf polos. And I love Dallas. Don't get me wrong. I love it here in Dallas. And I love most of the guys I meet. But here's the funny thing. Is I've made new friends. Say I meet a guy from Longview. Immediately. Oh, hey, what's up? Yeah. So you're from Longview. Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so and so-and-so. Oh, Longview's a town an hour and a half outside of Dallas to the east. I'm from a town an hour north of Dallas to hour north. But small, much bigger than my town. Triple the size of my hometown, at least double the size of my hometown, but still a distinct, standalone, small town in the grand scheme of things, under 100,000, around 100,000 people. But we have a commonality, and what do you think I'm doing? I'm thinking, and it doesn't matter if we truly do or not. I don't know at that point, but I am like, how's your chicken? That's what I'm doing. Oh, you're from Tyler. Oh, you're from Louisiana, from Monroe, Louisiana. Oh, I think I have something in common. Personality, culture, whatever it may be, common likes, common interests, common maybe even aspirations socially. And I'm doing the same thing that everyone else does, just on a different subject. I don't give a damn about food. So I can't do it over food. I'm not going to do it over sports because sports is fun when we have differences and we can argue and prick each other. My point is, I don't think I'm special or I'm different or I'm more of an individual. What I'm acknowledging is this thing that exists in all of us, and that's how it exists in me. And by the way, here's what's interesting, okay? Although it does come true a lot of times. Oh, you're from Victoria. You're from Beaumont. although it does come true that I do find some cultural similarities with those guys, that maybe a higher probability than a guy that grew up in Highland Park. Nothing against my guys in Highland Park. It's inside of Dallas, very affluent community. Although there may be a higher probability that I find commonality with those guys, it certainly doesn't always pan out, and it's often pans out that my friend from Liberia who drives a cab in Harlem and I end up having more commonalities. And that's a true story. And that's why, in the end, we can't rest on our commonalities. We can't rest on, how's your chicken? How's the taste? The conversation has to get somewhere real, authentic, maybe to a place of disagreement, maybe a place of uncomfortability. Does that actually work? Is it actually necessary for a 5-year-old? It's not good enough for the 48% of us to just go, well, let's just go on to the next thing. It's uncomfortable. We need, yes, to embrace the fact that we're human beings and want to belong in tribes and look at our commonalities. And that's a, familiar instinct. And it's what makes me a slow burn, because I don't lead with my commonalities, right? That's why a lot of you, I've heard it from Fox viewers and ESPN viewers. I wasn't so sure about you at first. I heard it in my personal life. A lot of my best friends started out, not enemies, but that little scene in the Western where you kind of glint and glare at each other and the music plays, and they end up being my best friends, right? That's me. I'm a slow burn. But I would like to think, if somebody gives me the time, like we give the time to critical thought on Ukraine, on nuclear war, on vaccines, on small towns versus big towns, not just do you like your chicken, but let's entertain the dude that says chicken stinks at the table, that we get to a place that is real. Not such a big deal when you're sitting at dinner with 6 friends. A very big deal when you're selecting medicines for your children, and a very big deal when the world is moving towards war with nuclear warheads at the ready. We simply can't, I don't know. Let's just go along. That's going to do it for me today here on the Will Cain Podcast. I will see you again on Friday. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.